And I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. And please, if you have any questions, or when you have any questions, please unmute and let me know. All right, I want to share with you just a fascinating exploration of dreams that we have been reading about in our parsha, starting back with Yosef when he was a kid, to the dreams of the butler and the baker in prison when Joseph was in prison, to Pharaoh's dreams, and explore what they mean, how Joseph came to understand them, and just kind of shedding light on it. This is all from a shiur from a rabbi at Shalom through Yeshiva University. So it was just so interesting, again, coming from the perspective of we know stories and we just know them and say them, and we don't think about what's behind them, what they mean, how they're connected, or anything. So I wanted to share this with you. So we're going to kind of be skipping around. We'll turn to some text, but some text will just relate as a story and hopefully remember some of the details that we need. So when you think of a dreamer in Torah, who do you think of? Think of Joseph, right? Joseph's dreams. However, Joseph's father, Jacob, was really the first dreamer. So he was the dreamer who dreamt the Jacob's ladder and saw the angels going up and down. And he had a dream. So it says, where did Joseph come to be a person who even would have dreams that would be meaningful in any way to talk about? It says, from his father. And more than that, we know that Joseph was, and however we want to understand it, he was the favored child of Jacob. If you could say that he was identified as for special needs, for special consideration, because of Jacob seeing in Joseph that he was going to have a different kind of a life and need a different kind of, a unique, Kathy, an individualized plan for education, an IEP for people. It's like you can't have just like cookie cutter education for people. It needs to be according to what they need, and that Joseph needed that. And so Jacob educated him in a certain way. And I don't know if they talked about it around the Shabbos table or whatever. Oh, there was that time I had the dream about the angels going up and down. But more than just family lore, it would have been something that Jacob would have instructed Joseph in. This is about dreams. So we want to understand that from the perspective then when Joseph shares his dreams that he has with his brothers. Now, we know that when he shares his dreams with his brothers are not only not impressed, they are very angry with his dreams, even though Joseph never says what the dreams mean. So if you remember, there were two dreams. And the first dream was, as he said, if you can look back at it, the dream was, as he said, we were all gathering sheaves of grain in the field. That was part one. Part two was all of the sheaves were standing, and my sheaf, Joseph's sheaf, was taller than the rest, and all of the other sheaves bowed down to my sheaf. That was dream number one. The second dream was that the 11 stars, and we say this on Passover, who knows 11? I know 11. 11 are the stars of Joseph's dream. Joseph's second dream was that the stars were around him and the stars were all bowing to him, along with the sun and the moon. He didn't say anything about, and this means I'm going to rule over you. He was like, you could say he was naive, politically stupid, whatever you want to say, like why you would share these dreams with people where they do have some sort of implication where it's not unreasonable for people to conclude this guy wants to lord it over us. And so much so that his father, Jacob, upon hearing the dream, it says that he chastises Joseph and says, what, your mother and I are going to bow to you. It's like Joseph didn't say anything about his mother, who actually had already passed away in childbirth with Benjamin. Your mother and I are going to bow down to you. He didn't say that. Sun and the moon, does that necessarily mean mother and father? What does that mean? Jacob made an assumption about what the dream meant. Joseph really was sharing it, saying like, I don't even know what this means. Now, Hold that thought. What's weird about those dreams, especially the first one? The first dream was about sheaves of grain. Usually it says our understanding is that when people have dreams, now I know we've all had some really crazy, crazy dreams that made no sense whatsoever, but our understanding of prophetic dreams is that a prophetic dream takes a form that is relevant to the person who is having the dream, meaning that it fits the circumstances, not the content, but the form is going to relate to the person. So this was actually very strange that Joseph was dreaming about sheaves of grain, because the business of Jacob and his family they were not farmers, they were shepherds. So if he was supposed to be having a dream about his brothers bowing down to him, it should have been, your sheep were around my sheep and your sheep were all bowing to my sheep. Like, why am I dreaming about sheaves of grain? So, and it also didn't say that his brothers were bowing down to him. It says that the sheaves of grain. So hold on to that. Then we have the stars and the sun and the moon. It's not clear what that means. And we aren't given any interpretation. The only thing that we are really told is that his brothers hated him for it, and that his brothers basically interpreted the dreams to mean that Joseph was going to try to lord over them. And that's actually part of why they thought that they were right in wanting to do away with him, because kingship was meant to go to the tribe of Judah through the person of Judah. And if Joseph was getting into the picture, that meant that he was really usurping the role of his brother. And if you're doing that, then basically you need to be taken out of the family because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. So they had many reasons to be jealous, to be concerned, and to think that they were entitled to make a decision about him. But nowhere along the way are we ever given a little sidelight that says, and what this dream meant is. So we just all know this. We know this from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. All we know is the information, but because the brothers had a response to it, we've interpreted it that way too. Oh, Joseph was like arrogant and he's thinking this. It's like, it never says that Joseph thought anything other than it being unwise to share something that could be interpreted in a way that would make his brothers upset and even his father upset. But it also says about his father, it says that his father shomer et hadavar, his father kept it in mind, that his father kept it in mind, like, like this means something, because he, Jacob of all people, would be the person who would know that those kind of dreams, those aren't just like the stuff of like, wow, like, sometimes in the morning, Steve and I will say to you, oh, you should see like the weird dream I had, it's some sort of a concoction of our past, present, future thing that's like so bizarre. We have those kind of dreams. But this wasn't that, because people don't get upset about those kind of dreams. They're like, oh, that was such a weird dream. But Joseph's dreams, they pushed the buttons. And the question is, what do those dreams really mean? And does Joseph ever figure it out about what those dreams mean? So now we're going to fast forward. Where's the next time that we see dreams for Joseph? And that's going to be when he's in prison. When he's in prison, and he's in prison with the cupbearer and the baker, the head of those, the chief baker and the chief butler, wine steward. And they share their dreams. And he says that they have a downcast face. And when he's in prison, he says to them, he says to them, why did you take, why do you have a downcast face? Oh, sorry, I can't find it. And they said, well, we have these dreams. And he says, dreams belong to God. Tell me and I'll tell you what they mean. So I want to have you think, like, you just said dreams belong to God. Now you're saying, tell me. It's like, since when did he become a dream interpreter? Like, me and God are so tight. Like, you tell me your dream and I'll tell you what God wants for you. It's like, that sounds really arrogant. But that's not what he was saying. What he was saying is, dreams belong to God, meaning God is trying to speak to you and give you a message. And the message is actually clear. If you tell me the information, I will be able to tell you what it means. So when they tell Joseph their dream, each of them has a reference to something three. Either it's got three tendrils on the blossoms of the grapes or the three baskets of bread. And Joseph interprets this to be that it's going to be in 3 days. It's like, how did he figure that out? How would you know? I mean, I dreamt I had, 3 cups of coffee. Does that mean I'm going to have 3 cups of coffee in 3 days? Like, why does a number mean days? It says, well, Joseph also knew something else. It says that he was on top of things politically, and he knew that in 3 days was Pharaoh's birthday. And that, in fact, is reported right after, 3 days after these dreams are interpreted. It says it's Pharaoh's birthday, and Joseph's interpretations come true. Says, so what did Joseph know? He said he knew that that was the system in the royal court, that on Pharaoh's birthday, that people who were imprisoned were there for 1 year, kind of like you're there for a year, and if after a year, either you receive a pardon or clemency or something, or you're executed. So he knew, like, 3 days on this momentous time, something is going to happen. And when the dreams were given to him, told to him, it says that the wine steward, he described that he had the Pharaoh's cup in his hand, and he was squeezing the grapes into the cup for Pharaoh and putting it in his hand. Joseph was like, well, that's really straightforward. Pharaoh's in your dream, you're in your dream, the wine is going into the cup. He's going to restore you to your position. As opposed to the baker who said, I have 3 baskets on top of my head filled with baked goods, and the birds are eating the bread. And Joseph says, in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to lift off your head and the birds are going to eat you. Which was, I'm sure he was not so happy to hear that interpretation, which is exactly what happens. Like, how did he know that? He said, well, if the birds are eating the bread and Pharaoh's not in your dream, and it's being eaten, that is a symbol for you. And you're not going to be in the picture with Pharaoh because Pharaoh's not in your dream. So he said that they were really pretty straightforward, that it wasn't, I went to dream interpretation school and I learned how to do this, figure this out. Joseph was understanding that these were specific, he was being given enough information. But now he is still left with, but what do my dreams mean? What do my dreams mean? Are they connected? Is it like the butcher and is it like the baker and the wine steward? What is my dream? So he's learned about dreams from, it's kind of like he went a little bit to dream interpretation school with what he learned from the baker and from the wine steward, of being able to understand that things that occur in, like if a number is there, it has to do with time. So that when then Pharaoh has his dream, and he says the 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat cows, and the 7 skinny stalks ate the 7 fat stalks. He said he knew it was about time, but he knew also that it wasn't days, because days is like, wouldn't be a relevant factor, that it had to be years. So that's what he said, it's 7 years. And he also tells Pharaoh, you got your dreams messed up. Your dreams weren't the 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat cows, and the 7 skinny stalks ate the 7 full stalks. It was that the 7 fat cows ate the 7 hefty stalks, and the 7 skinny cows ate the 7 skinny stalks. And that we're talking then about an agricultural thing happening, and that we're talking about then a time of plenty and a time of famine. And the fact that the dreams were related meant that it was going to happen like right away. This wasn't 7 years hence, this was going to be like starting now. So when he gives those interpretations, he is able to understand from what Pharaoh was telling him a reasonable understanding, which then still leaves him with, what about my dreams? What about my dreams? And it's not until his brothers come down to Egypt that he finally understands. And so where we find that is, hold on one second. It is in parsha. One second. I apologize. I cut off instead of my so much depth of this here. Second. Okay, it's when his brothers finally come down to him. Hold on, admit Mary here. It's chapter 42 of Bereshit. And this is after his brothers come down to get bread because it's during the time of the famine. They come down for grain. And at that time, Joseph has interpreted the dreams for Pharaoh. He's already figured out what to do as far as saving all the grain and giving it out slowly to the people so they don't starve. So he's on that and he still hasn't figured out what his dream means. It's like, sometimes how it is for us, right? You can figure out the answer to somebody else's problem, but you don't figure out like, what's my problem? I don't have an answer. But as soon as he saw his brothers, so this is chapter 42, verse 7, and it says, Joseph saw his brothers and he recognized them, but he acted like a stranger toward them and spoke with them harshly, which was just a ruse. He asked them, from where do you come? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then it says, verse 9, Joseph recalled the dreams that he dreamed about them. And now he starts to put it together. And now we're going to see what those dreams meant, as opposed to something that was just to anger his brothers. Was it a sign of early arrogance? Was it just foolishness? What was it? But now he knows that dreams do mean something, that he had interpreted correctly for the wine steward and the baker. So what do his dreams mean? They were clearly prophetic. They clearly meant something, but what? So what is it that he sees now? Is that now he realizes that the sheaves of grain represent food. They represent food, and now Joseph is in charge of the food. And when it says that his sheaf was taller than the others, meaning like he had more food than his brothers, and that his brothers' sheaves bowing to him. It says bowing does not necessarily mean worship or subservience. It can also mean dependency. It means dependency, and that he saw and recognized then that it wasn't about power, it was about responsibility. And that Joseph had been tapped to be responsible to care for the physical needs of his family, of his brothers, to give them food. And that bowing was not like, oh, your highness. It was, they are going to be dependent on you, and you are going to be providing for them. So how, as a young kid in Canaan, when you're a shepherd, how would God ever get a message to you? The life you're going to lead is going to prepare you in a way. If God would have come out and shown him a video of how his life was going to unfold, it would be more bizarre than the dream. He wouldn't have even believed it. It's like, what are you even talking about? I'm going to be the head of Egypt, second in command to Pharaoh. That makes even less sense than the dream. So God couched this unfolding, like had to put this seed in so that he would recognize it once it was time. So that's the other thing, is that a dream may not make any sense until the time it's necessary to make sense. It could just be kind of sitting there waiting to be understood. This isn't in the category of dreams, but I'm going to connect it to something else, which seems to have nothing to do with it at all, but is about the Megillat Esther, the Megillah of Esther. Now, we have learned together before, because I love talking about it, so I know I've shared this with you many times. In the Megillah, in the listing of Haman's sons when they were hanged, there are miniature letters in the names, which actually end up spelling out the date of the Nuremberg hangings of the year, the hangings of the Nazis corresponding to the hanging of the Nuremberg, the hanging of Haman's sons. Now, we see this now, and it's like, there it is. But what did it mean in 1930? When people saw these little letters, it meant nothing. And how easy it would have been for someone to say, that was probably just a scribal error. Let's just fix that. It doesn't mean anything. And so like, no, let's just leave it until we know what it means. And it will reveal itself because there's an unfolding process. So Joseph needed to have something, And even if it just kind of needles him and a little bit is like on the back burner, that dream meant something. That dream meant something. What does it mean? What does it mean? It keeps us alert to information and the scenario of like, what does this mean and how am I supposed to understand it? Once he understood it, for sure, it changed the way he related to his brothers. When he saw his brothers for the first time, he should have had them all executed. Honestly, they sold him. Kidnapping is a capital offense in Judaism. He could have and should have had them executed. Instead, because of his dream, he knew that his role was to save them, and that all of this had happened in order for him to be responsible for, in charge of, and able to provide for their physical sustenance. That changes the whole scenario and changes the trajectory of the Jewish people. We would not be sitting here today if he would have gone with a reasonable plan A response to his brothers. But his dream is like, now I know what this is all about. But then it doesn't explain the next part, which is, what about the stars and the sun and the moon? What is that? And so as he sees this all unfolding, he realizes, like, what are stars? Where do we first see stars? In Torah. Where's our first star connection? You should, Lisa, I can see you saying it, so you can unmute and say what you're saying.
In beginning of Genesis.
Great. In what context?
In the separation of the firmament and the lights in the sky.
Okay, great. So we have that at creation, and then from the Jewish narrative, where do we see stars? It's like the Jewish people are compared to
the mazel, right?
To the stars in the sky, right? You will be so numerous.
That be as many as the stars.
Right, as many as the numerous as the stars of the sky. This was the promise to Abraham. Okay, you'll be as numerous as the stars in the sky, and we're also compared to the grains of sand. So it's like we have a lofty description and we have a very earthly description. We have the sand of the sea that we're also compared, like grains of sand, and stars. The two things are opposite. Sand, you get like a sense of sand only by the fact that you have all the sand packed together. I'll just say sand is really hard to deal with. We are clearly come from a landlocked family. Steve and I took our grandchildren to the beach when we were in Florida. And evidently we brought home most of the beach with us in the car. And our kids were like, did you not like rinse the thing? Did you not see like the little foot shower thing at the beach before you left? I'm like, no, I didn't even, I don't go to the beach. Like I didn't even know to look for that. And they had also brought shells home with them, but that was a bucket of shells. I didn't notice that there was like a lot of sand in the bottom and like in our chute. Anyway, there was so much sand, and you can vacuum sand like forever, and there's always sand. So, and sand just like clumps together, and it was wet sand. Anyway, they sold the car even with the sand in it, but we were like, okay, obviously we are the landlocked grandparents and don't know what we're doing on the beach for next time. So here we have the Jewish people are compared to the sand as well as the stars. Stars have their prominence. They don't touch each other at all. They're each one stands alone and is luminous by itself. So when we talk about which metaphors are we talking about the Jewish people? When we're talking about the stars, we're talking about the Jews as lofty as well as numerous. And the reference to the stars was to descendants, to the descendants and of the Jewish people, that Joseph was going to be again responsible for the descendants of his brothers, for their families and their well-being, and also for their spiritual well-being. So not only the sheaves of grain was about the physical, they need to survive and they need bread and grain, and the stars was that they were going to be dependent. Again, they were bowing not in submissiveness and not in like, we're worshiping you. We are dependent on you, Joseph, for our spiritual well-being. And how does that play out? In a very interesting way. He needs his family to all come together because that was clear. The 11 stars, the entire family needs to be together, which is why he had to go through this whole thing to get Benjamin to come down and his father. Everybody had to come in order for this dream, for him to fulfill his purpose. It was not for his glory, it was for his mission. When they come down, it says that Egypt was a completely morally bankrupt place. He's going to bring his family down there. What's going to happen? They'll disappear. They're going to assimilate and they'll be just swallowed up. So Joseph makes provisions, which is he gets the land of Goshen and he settles his family there away from everybody else. And then he specifically tells his brothers when he introduces them to Pharaoh, because imagine Pharaoh's like, wow, we've got Joseph and now we've got his brothers. We've got like the dream team of, he's so brilliant and so amazing. I'm sure we've got really amazing people. It specifically says that Joseph sent the least of his brothers in to meet Pharaoh, not all of them. He sent like representatives. Now, I don't know what least means, if it's like the shortest, the least impressive looking. I don't know what it was. It just says the least of his brothers. He said, sent to Pharaoh, these are my brothers. So he's like, okay, whatever, I can do without them. And he said, and be sure and tell Pharaoh that you are shepherds, because the Egyptians hate shepherds. Okay, because Egypt is agrarian and there's always been an eternal animosity between shepherds and farmers, mostly over use of land. It's very practical. It's not anything, whatever. So it goes back to Cain and Abel, that the shepherds and the farmers do not get along, and they considered the Jewish people an abomination. Even when the brothers go to eat with Joseph, it says that Egyptians thought even eating with Jews would be like something not so good. Etta.
I've heard that the Egyptians were vegetarians.
Yes, because they worshiped animals. They did not, for them, animals were work animals. So they were not, which also goes to Pharaoh's dream, that when he has the emaciated cows eating the emaciated grain, it was about, you're going to lose. It's kind of like having a dream that all of your tractors and plows like all fall apart. That they were the work animals. It wasn't their, Burger King burger that they were concerned about. So yes, they were vegetarian, and what everything about vegetarian or not, it's like they thought, shepherding, and for them, animals were gods, which we already know that. That's the whole thing of Passover, is when the Jews sacrifice the Korban Pesach, the Passover offering, and they make it very clear that they are killing the god of Egypt, that is considered a really awful thing for the Egyptians, even though God made them so that they didn't react and they didn't attack the Jews on account of that. So Joseph wanted to protect their spiritual framework by having them be physically in a place in Goshen and not near anything having to do with Pharaoh. And he did not want his brothers or their children or anybody else working for Pharaoh and being involved in the court and the intrigue and just the immorality of Egypt. It was hard enough that he himself had to be in it. So he was responsible for the stars. He was responsible for the spiritual greatness of his brothers' families and of his family, as well as for the physical well-being of food. And that then when he understands that this sets into motion his whole plan and his whole approach with how he deals with his brothers, and then his dream makes sense. Until we get to the last part, which is, what's the sun and the moon? What is the sun and the moon? It can't be his father and his mother. His mother had already passed away. But that had been Jacob's interpretation of his dream, like, your mother and I are going to bow down to you. Joseph never said that. He says, but what's the sun and the moon? So let's think about what was Joseph's mission, was to take care of his family. Just as an aside, we have a concept which we talk about on Hanukkah, actually, and other times as well. And during this period, especially this week, this parsha of Miketz that we are in now, is the, Vayigash of Judah, Yehuda meeting up with Joseph, and Yehuda saying that he would give his life to save Benjamin, and Joseph and Yehuda meet up, and it's considered not just like brother and brother, it's like, this is like two cosmic forces. says, in the future, there will be two Mashiachs, Mashiach ben Yosef, a Mashiach who comes from the line of Joseph, and Mashiach ben David, who comes from the line of David. And Yosef's job is to prepare the Jewish people, to take care of like the physical preparations, just like the original Joseph. What was Joseph's role? He was to prepare the Jewish people, at that time just his tribe, in order to be able to protect them so they could survive what was going to be a long, long time in the land of Egypt. That there would have to be a people to redeem after 400 years. They already had the prophecy. Abraham had already received prophecy. Your children will be strangers in a strange land for 400 years, and then I will take them out with an outstretched arm. It's like, how's this going to work? Think of how long the Jewish people have been in the United States and how well that's going. With assimilation, intermarriage, the whole thing, it's like, it's only a couple hundred years and not 400 and not oppression on top of it. Like this was going to be and there were only 70 people to start. So tell me how 70 people, that's how many people went down to Egypt. How do 70 people, number one, turn into a nation, and number two, preserve their nationhood? That was in and of itself going to be a miraculous, I don't even know. I would have said, like, you've got to be kidding me. That's my job. So Joseph was like, yep, that's your job. Your job is take care of them physically and take care of them spiritually, to set them up for as much success as they can have. And that's what he did. His responsibility for the Jewish people was really, ultimately, could have been to make sure that they returned to the land of Israel. But obviously Joseph didn't live that long. He did not live long enough. He lived to 110, but he didn't live long enough to be able to get the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. But in order to complete his mission, he was like, I need to get back to the land of Israel. So he makes his brothers promise, I can be buried here, because he was a head of state. So there's no way that Pharaoh was going to let him be buried in the land of Israel the way they had allowed Jacob to be buried in the land of Israel. He'd be here in Egypt and embalmed, but he made his brothers promise that they would, when God liberated them from Egypt, that they would carry his bones out of Egypt and take them to the land of Israel. And in fact, they did that. It says, who went and got his bones? It says Moshe. Moshe got them and he carried them. It says, while the other Jewish people were getting the wealth and riches from Egypt, that Moshe went and got Joseph's bones. But was Joseph successful in getting Joseph's bones back? Was Moses successful in getting Joseph's bones back to the land of Israel? Almost, but not quite, because Moses himself doesn't get to go back to the land of Israel. So who takes them in? The next leader of the Jewish people is Joshua. Joshua takes them in. Who is Joshua? It says Joshua is from the tribe of Ephraim. Who's Ephraim? Ephraim was Joseph's son. So it is through Joseph's grandchild, that his bones are returned specifically to the land of Israel. And it says, and what was Joshua's like shining moment? We always think of it, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. That's one peak moment. He said, but the other was, it says that he went to battle, and I didn't look it up in Tanakh. Didn't have time because I just heard this. It says, is when the Jewish people were in battle and they needed more time. And it says, in the merit of Joshua, and maybe perhaps the merit of Joseph, it says, the sun and the moon stood still. It says, aha, the sun and the moon. What's the sun and the moon in Joseph's dream? It's not you. It's not you, Joseph. It's your grandson, great-grandson, Joshua. In his merit, the sun and the moon are going to bow to him in order for the sake of the Jewish people, because you, Joseph, did your job, your responsibility. You were able to take care of their physical needs. You were able to take care of their spiritual needs, their social needs. You did everything you could to take care of them. Was your dream as a child that you're going to be lording over your brothers? Couldn't be further from the truth. His dream was, you are going to be responsible for your brothers. Not only are you responsible for your immediate brothers and family, you're going to be responsible for their descendants. and making sure that there are descendants. You may be second in command to Pharaoh, and it's amazing you saved Egypt. That was an accomplishment in and of itself. It was wonderful. Your bigger task is that you're going to save the Jewish people. And it's Joseph did that. And through his dreams were this early kind of kernel of something for him to have to hang on to, which on one hand triggered the very events that allowed him to do exactly that. It's kind of strange if you think about it, because you think like, okay, Joseph is being primed to save the Jewish people. How are we going to do that? We'll give him a dream telling him that, but it'll come across in a way that's going to make his brothers so angry that they want to kill him and sell him into slavery. So they ends up going through this whole circuitous route. So they ends up actually being second in charge in Pharaoh and doing the very thing that the dream said that he was going to do. It's like, whoa. When we think about how things happen, I mean, first of all, this was so interesting to me to find out, just to learn more about this, of how this is all connected, but also how we understand the things that happen in our own lives. I'm not saying that we're having prophetic dreams. Who am I to say? I don't think we are, but whatever. But we have things that happen that are little whispers to us. I don't know if you felt that, of like what you should be doing, a choice you should be making, and having the mindset of there's something unfolding here, and it might be happening in a way that seems highly unlikely. In fact, not only unlikely, counter to what I thought was supposed to be happening and how it was supposed to happen. We think we know so much. I don't know anything. And sometimes we get like a little whisper of something that we should just hang on to, and that we should be like Jacob and keep it in mind. And we don't know these twists and turns. We don't know where they're leading, other than they are leading us forward. And as long as, if we just can go with that. And Joseph himself is punished, says he ended up staying in prison 2 extra years because he asked the wine steward to remember him to Pharaoh, and he starts complaining about the fact that he was sent to prison and unjustifiably. It's like, seriously, Yosef, you did not figure out yet that everything that's happening to you is that you are in such bizarre circumstances. You have not figured out that you're really going someplace. Why are you whining? Says, God said, you're staying here for another 2 years, so you can have time to think about this. And he comes out after the 2 years. And then when Pharaoh has his dreams and he's called out, he's ready, because he wasn't even ready to completely fulfill his mission. So why did God in any case make a famine in Egypt at that particular moment? So like, which came first? Joseph was ready to come out. And so then God puts this in motion of the famine and the years of plenty and the years of famine. It's like, okay, now it's time to bring the family together. Joseph could have thought, okay, now this is really the end. I'm in prison for another 2 years. This is horrible. But instead he was like, I must have something I must still have something to learn before I'm ready for my next step. So if we see and are able to see each of these times that seem like such tremendous setbacks, as I must have something else I'm supposed to be learning, something else I'm supposed to accomplish, something else I'm supposed to do before I'm ready for the next step. It's just so fascinating to think about, because sometimes we think, people will say to me, I wish I would have learned, more Torah when I was a kid. My Sunday school was this, whatever it is. My parents were that, my neighborhood was this. People have like all these things of like, I wish only this. It's like, you weren't ready. I wasn't ready. We weren't ready. We have what we need when we need it. And it may be that even if it's just like, I wasn't ready today, but I might be ready tomorrow. And to say like, what's ready to unfold for me today, instead of like spending so much time, you could put yourself in what feels like a therapeutic situation, but is really counterproductive. Why did this happen? Why did I have to go through this? Blah, blah, blah. Instead of just saying, okay, that was interesting. Now what am I supposed to do? Because we might miss the whole opportunity to see that there's something opening up in front of us. Joseph went from a place, even just those, you'd think after everything he'd been through, that he was ready already. He wasn't ready. He needed another 2 years, not quite ready to come out. And then he was ready for prime time. And then God is like, okay, now we can set this plan into motion because Joseph is ready. And the brothers, he'll be ready then to be reunited. And instead of executing his brothers and cutting off ties with his father, he'll be ready to take responsibility for his brothers, create the Jewish people, and save them for their time that they're going to be in Egypt, and be then ready for the tremendous salvation that will come in the Exodus. Fascinating stories. So we know things also when we know them. Would it have helped Joseph to know the meaning of his dream when he was a kid? What would God even have told him? It wouldn't even made any sense. So people always say, oh, if I only would have known, I should have known. If I would have known, it's like, no, you weren't ready to hear it. What were you going to do with it anyway? Like, you'll know when you're ready to know. And it'll then become so clear to be like, I can't believe I didn't know. It's like, it wasn't time. It wasn't time. So God willing, all of our, I don't even know what we call them, our dreams, our aspirations, our plans, the things that we think are that we're setting in motion, the things that we think are stopping us from putting things into motion, to not view it in that way and just say, okay, it's supposed to be some other way. So, you know, there's this, actually I call it a terrible Yiddish saying, is man plans and God laughs, which makes it sound like God is just like playing with us. Ha ha ha. It's not that. Actually, I don't know that. Someone told me that that's not what the Yiddish word actually means. It's man plans and God. Man, does anybody know the Yiddish phrase and exactly what? Etta, what is it?
Man tracht und Gott lacht.
And God laughs. Says, so what is that laughter? Laughter is like, ha ha ha, you idiot. It's like, that's not what it is. Laughter is when there is a disconnect between two things. You thought it was this, but it was that. And laughter is for good, not in a mocking way. It's not that God is mocking us. It is like we make our plans and God is almost like, I have something in store for you. You can't even anticipate what it is. Or it's like, you think you know all the information and you're making this plan. You only know like this much. And I have the whole bigger picture in mind. And that's the cause of the laughter. It's not like, I don't know, I just pictures like a mythological God who's sitting up in with a long white beard on a throne, like laughing at the pathetic human beings who are down here in this world, like trying to do things. It's not, that's not where it's coming from. It's coming from people. You have limited knowledge. You do need to make plans. That is a Jewish thing. We make plans. But God might be laughing because there might be a whole lot of other things that are part of it that we can't even anticipate because we don't know, and we're limited in our perception and our understanding, and we only know what we know. We can't know what we don't know yet. So it is so revisit and that phrase, because it casts God in a really inappropriate, untrue light. That's not what it is. All right, so Joseph has these dreams. He doesn't know what they mean. He lives with them for many, many years without knowing what they mean. And it's not until he sees his brothers and the time is right, and then he begins to know. But he also went through a process by understanding the dreams that the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker, the baker and the wine steward have in prison. And that gives him an opportunity to not only help them, but to give him some clarity about his own dreams when the time comes, so that he's ready. And I want to emphasize too, that when he sees his brothers, to be able to overcome natural emotion, again, his natural response should have been, put them all in jail, to be nice, and execute them to not be so nice. And that the dream that says, Joseph recalled the dreams. And it was then that everything then made sense. And the fact that he was able to access them meant that they had to be already there. If he wouldn't have had the dreams, what would he have done? the dreams were a protection for him as well, because they alerted him, even though they were on the back burner, he didn't know what they meant until like all the pieces started fitting together. It was there. Had he not had the dreams, what would he have done? So the dreams were there as a protection. Who knows what he would have done? So who knows? It's all very much more mysterious than we understand it to be. And it's such a beautiful, incredible conclusion of this week's parsha of Vayigash. And as we go, then the Haftorah is going to be about the combination of Ephraim, the descendant of Joseph, and Yehuda, of those two being reunited, because the Jewish people have always struggled between the descendants of Rachel and the descendants of Leah. So Joseph is from Rachel, and Judah is from Leah. So we have Joseph is the Mashiach from Rachel's line, and David is the Mashiach from Leah's line. And in order to be complete, we need both of them, but they have different roles and they go sequentially. And first is Joseph, and then is from the house of David. So we don't know what that's going to look like as the world is prepared for us. We don't know what that means exactly, but those are the times that we're considered to be in, are in the preparation of the Jewish people. And it's taken some pretty strange twists and turns that we can't really understand. And it'll be probably through hindsight when we look back, and then we'll be able to see what really happened. And then we'll know when we know. And then we'll be like the Megillah. Those little letters will make sense at a certain point. And until then, be like, well, it must be a scribal error. And so we're like, oh, this must be a mistake. It's like, no, this is actually leading to something very profound and important. So take your life seriously, but also keep in mind that there's a much bigger picture going on, a much bigger process that's going on that we're all a part of, and we all play an incredibly important role. And we're supposed to learn from Yosef to take on his responsibility is to help other Jewish people, family first, take care of your family, their physical needs and their spiritual needs. And it was interesting that it was their physical needs first. If a person is starving, it doesn't really matter what's happening with their spirituality. So if people are in need, we need to help take care of them. All right, ladies, that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I hope you'll enjoy the Parsha of Vayigash when we get to it. Even though obviously I know how it ends, I hate, not hate. I'm always sitting on the edge of my chair when we finish Mikates and we don't go right into Vayigash, because it's such a cliffhanger. But it's, so one hand is like, we know how it's all going to end. It's just, it is a cliffhanger until it happens. So as they say, in the end, it's all good. And if it's not good yet, it's not the end. So that's the best words to have. So we're not there yet, but we're getting there. Any questions or anything about Joseph's dreams, Jacob as a dreamer, our dreams, anything at all like that? Or anything else having to do with Joseph and his brothers? One last piece about Joseph and his brothers is that taking care of them also meant allowing them to do teshuvah for what they did, allowing them to be forgiven. And the way they did it, that's why he set up the specific test with saying that he was going to keep Benjamin as a slave and let the other brothers go, because Benjamin supposedly had taken Joseph's goblet, but he hadn't. It was placed there. He was set up. But Joseph wanted to see and needed to see the brothers have a different attitude towards Benjamin, who was his full brother, son of Rachel, than they had towards him. Because we said, when does somebody have an opportunity to do complete teshuvah? Is when they're in the same situation again and they make the right choice. Until that happens, it's like someone can plan to do the right thing, but if they don't actually have an opportunity to really do the right thing in the same kind of way, their teshuvah is not 100% complete. It's still often as good as we get. Joseph wanted his brothers to be able to pass the test and to stand up and not let Benjamin be taken. And so he had to frame him in order to get his brothers to be able to do that. And they did. And so that whole difficulty, which is is this week's parsha of Yehuda saying, take me because my father will die if Benjamin doesn't come back with me, because he loved Benjamin's mother. And to have it be where Judah has to come face to face and verbalize, my father loved Benjamin's mother more than he loved my mother. Very painful, very difficult. It could have been that they said, you know what, we'll be all rid of Rachel's kids and then we can just have dad to ourselves and the family will be good and happy. That was the test. And Joseph sets them up for that to allow them to rise to the occasion. It's just beautiful. Don't exactly advise trying this at home, like with somebody like, I'm going to put you in the same bad situation and see if you come up with do the right things. Like, don't do that. But it was actually considered a gift that Joseph gave his brothers to allow them to restore themselves to their full righteousness. It's always more humanly satisfying to be more righteous than someone else. That's why we call it self-righteous. There's something very satisfying about thinking that we're better than somebody else. And Joseph could have done that. And especially since he had his dreams that everyone's bowing to him. But you change bowing to they're dependent on me and I'm responsible for them, then it's my job to make them as great as I am and as great as they can be. And that is true kingship. And that is kingship from a Jewish perspective, is when we take that responsibility for other people. So God willing, we as Yehudim, the miniature Jewish people, and we are the royalty, is that we will take that attitude with other people. And our job is to help other people be as great as they can be in every aspect of their life. And when we do that, that's what makes us great. So just like in Pirkei Avot, it says, who's the honorable person? The person who honors other people. When we make other people great in their eyes and in our own eyes, we've done the biggest kindness and we have really elevated ourselves along with them. So lots to learn from Joseph. He's called Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the righteous one, not just for his withstanding the advances of Potiphar's wife, but his righteousness and the way he dealt with his family. You know, sometimes people are good in one arena of their life and not so good in other arenas of their life. He managed to be good in the personal and the family and professionally all the way around. It's quite an incredible accomplishment. We have a lot to learn from him. All right, ladies, I'm on if anybody has any additional questions. I hope you'll be inspired by Yosef and that we should all find the conclusion and understand our lives, sometimes retroactively, of like, oh, that's what that was for, and figure things out, but mostly have faith that things are moving forward. Things are moving forward. All right, have a great week. I'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Ellyn,
Yes,
Mindy,
Mindy.
I have to tell you something. Do you know a Rabbi Cohn in Stamford?
Yes, Rabbi Cohen, who was in Denver.
I'm assuming so because he said he knows you, and that's
Yeah.
Brett and Alex just joined his synagogue.
Oh, that's so nice. That's lovely.
And said that they knew you, so I had to tell you.
That's right. Yeah, he was
So.
the rabbi at BMH.
Right. So
Yeah, that's so lovely. Such a friendly, outgoing, warm person.
They love it. They just love the synagogue and everybody and the people, and so I'll be
that makes
going
me
out there in
very happy.
January.
Yeah, oh, good.
So
That's great. Well, please, if you see him, please give him my best.
I will do that in January.
Great.
Yasher koach, Ellyn. It's
Thank
wonderful.
you,
Thank you.
Alan,
Thank
and
you,
Mazel
Dr.
to
Yasher
you
koach.
too.
Thank you, Baruch T. All right, ladies, have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
too.
Ellen.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes, Etta.
I just have a question about last week, Hannah and the story of Hanukkah, the daughter of the Maccabee brothers. Where is that from? I didn't write it down, and I told the story in detail, and they went like, wait a minute,
Well,
we've
what are
never
you talking
heard
about?
that. Yeah.
Let's see, where is that? Oh,
What's the story?
this was from last week. It was about Hannah. Let me find out exactly where it is.
Thank you.
I forgot the name of the source for it. I'll have to look in my papers to find it for you, and
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
If you have time, I would so appreciate it.
I will look for
You
that.
text me if, or in any easier way.
Okay, I will look
Thank
for
you.
that and find it. I know it was, I think I want to say it was called Seder HaOlam. A text called Seder HaOlam, but I'm not positive. I'll look for it.
Thank you, thank you, thank
You
you.
are welcome.
Wonderful week.
You're welcome. All right, take care, everybody. Be well.
You too. Thank you so much for
My
inspiring us.
pleasure, Gabi. Take care.
This is not Hannah Shmuel's mom. We're talking about another Hannah.
Yes, this is a different Chana. Yes,
Okay.
another good Chana, but not her. All right, I'm gonna go look up.
Thank
and
you,
see if I can
Ellen.
find it. Thanks, Lisa. Bye, Wendy. Bye, Esther.
Bye,
Ellen, I guess there's
everyone.
a quick, was there class last week?
Yes.
Because I couldn't connect. I couldn't figure out what the problem was, but it never
Oh.
let me in. And so every
Oh,
week.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I was just curious. That's why I asked you if you were in Israel.